Good to see you, Richard.
Hey, Luis. Nice to see you too.
From Bhutan, we just came from Bhutan to Scotland.
Devon.
To Devon, of course. Yes. Well, you know how much this, it means that you're here doing World Happiness Week. Richard, for all of you who don't know him, he's a mystic and a poet. And you know, Richard, that today is International Day of Poetry.
Ah, good.
So yesterday was happiness, today is poetry. So who else should be here? And as you know, we've been exploring through the week suffering from multiple angles, and in many ways, suffering is related to wounds. And what you do with the gene keys and all the transmissions that you have and all the sequences that many people watching this know is so relevant for so many things, but especially I feel being a student of yours, when we think of healing, when we think of suffering. So probably we can jump right in into the wounds. I think that you can frame a bit where all these wounds are coming from, why they are at the core, and what is the genesis. Will be fantastic. But then it will be fantastic as well to have time to go and contemplate those wounds and see how we can heal them. What do you think?
I think that's perfect. Yes, perfect. And as you know, I have a single slide with some words on, so we could dive into that in a moment, because it's almost a poetic technology of suffering. And I'll begin by saying that when we use, these are not comfortable words, and even the word wound and the subject of suffering is not a comfortable subject when we begin it, because it's like we would like to be talking about happiness. That's why we're here. And yet we have to understand, I think, that embedded in the fabric of reality is this yearning for something, for that happiness. And how do we find that happiness? And in the work I do, I've discovered really that there are formulas for that are deeply woven into the DNA of every human being, and into the DNA and the fabric of all life. And they're like algorithms, actually. They're imprinted everywhere throughout nature and natural systems. And in the gene keys, I followed them particularly in humans, in us, to understand what, from a deep, mythical level, what drives our psyche, what drives our suffering. And so when I look at these different words in a minute, we can open up, like, what are the core wounds of humanity? Why are they there? How do they operate individually, and then how do they operate collectively? That relationship is really interesting. And then what are they there for? And then how do we heal them? Because the question people always ask me is like, why are they there? Why do we have to suffer? Of course, that's the great mystic question. And
what is the answer?
Yeah, sorry.
Is there an answer?
Well, I think the answer is we suffer in order, because it's the ground of our awakening. We are here to awaken to something greater, and the suffering is the root. It's that we have to follow, and we have to understand, and then we have to transform it and transmute it. And so it is there. It's the raw material. It's the base matter that we have to transform into something, and it has inside itself, a gift. And so but it's hidden. So we have to go into the suffering, transmute it, and then the gift is what emanates from the transformation. So we actually then realize, then we move to a higher evolution, which is probably in our future. But also it's in the now. So many individuals have discovered peace inside themselves. We haven't yet discovered world peace. But when there are enough individuals have discovered peace inside themselves, we'll begin to experience world peace. But there has to be a tipping point number. So that's what my work is all about, helping individuals to kind of understand that even the smallest acts of healing in their own inner life, in their psyche, ripple out into the collective. And I want to show you how that works today, because it's quite extraordinary.
This is gonna be amazing. Yeah, today, Richard, is day 4, and it's all about transformation.
Yes.
So we are going to move from transformation to transmutation, I feel. So let's go dive into
Great. So Roberto, if you can put up that slide. Okay, so we're going to dive a little bit into this table. And in the work I do, everything is worked out in 6s. And so, you know, when you see on the left side column there, you have these different, they're called the lines, the 6 lines, and it's based on the I Ching. If you don't know my work, and the gene keys, and the I Ching has this incredible correlation to our genetics, to our DNA, and that's the basis of the gene keys. That it's a way of mapping codes that are imprinted in our basic biology and in our psychology and in our psyche and sociology, and understanding them at a mythical, practical level. So it starts, you know, we kind of work through this table, and it's quite profound actually, and I'll go into it as much as I can. So we start with you'll see the column saying personal wound, and then there's a collective wounding, and then there's a racial wound, and there's a planetary wound, and then on the far right is what I call a healing virtue, which is really what is hidden inside that wound itself. And I should say that I also, you know, I'm not, you know, many people have referred to this wound as the sacred wound, and I think that's a really appropriate wording, because it is sacred. It's not something, you know, that because its purpose is for us to awaken to our divine nature, and that's really why we're even here to understand this. So we start with, like, I want to start with, and kind of, you can feel free, Luis, if you want to just, you know, ask me anything at any point. But if we start with the personal wound column and look at line 1, because line 1 relates to the foundation, right? The foundation. And so the foundational wound of humanity is about repression. It's something that's hidden. It's basically fear. And there's ways it's the fear of death, ultimately. It's the fear. No, we may not be afraid of death itself, but it's the fear of not existing. It's the fear of termination, right? And that's deep in our biology. It's in the biology of every single human being. So when you get very ill, you know, there's this impulse that just comes up inside you to survive, right? Because there's this, you know, so this repression is like a contraction of our life energy at the very core of our being, which is what fear is. Fear is a contraction. So when you look at, you know, so that's, you know, that's the first line. And I'll go across as well, because you can see, like, that when that ripples out into the collective, it becomes this, it's even more intense, because everything is accelerated when it goes out into the collective. So that becomes terror, you know, and that terror can be expressed, you know, these are, like, if you look in the racial wounding pattern, you'll see these are ancient patterns that drive us as whole groups, as whole races, as kind of tribal groups, you know, and there's this, it's the threat of invasion. You know, there's always, like, this contraction inside yourself, or this contraction inside one group or one family or one tribe or one race or color or creed or whatever it is. And then there's also, the moment you have that contraction, that repression, you have the threat of another one coming in and invading. So it creates this, that's where the terror comes from. And if you look even deeper at what that is in the body of humanity, it's actually, I would say, the core reason for disease itself, because some life force has not, the natural life force has not been fully allowed to be fully expressed through the vessel, So individually, it's not, that's what causes illness, and it's actually the reason. That's quite a mystic thing for disease itself. So the healing of the wound of the repression is also the healing of disease itself. And when you look over on the far side and you see the healing virtue is honesty. So honesty is, which sounds simple, right? But it's really about self-honesty to begin with, because that's the foundation of our journey of transformation. It begins by being honest with how you feel, and being honest and meeting your fear with honesty, with humility. And then that leads to honesty with others. And then that opens up the relational field. But it's all because we're not honest, and we don't want to feel the fear, and we don't know what to do with it. And we don't realize there's a purpose for it. So we fear even embracing it, or even looking at it, or even feeling it, because it's so uncomfortable in our body. And if anyone's ever sat in a room with their eyes closed, with no external stimulus, after a very short space of time, you will contact this fear, because it's deeply embodied inside every one of us. And it might come out as unease, it might come out as anxiety, it might come out as numbness, it might come out as boredom, it might come out as all kinds of things. But you will feel the grain of that kind of repression. There's something like held inside us. And it's that grain of the suffering that is the core that we actually have to kind of release what's inside that. And then the healing journey begins.
Wow. So Richard, just contemplating what you are saying with this line, it completely fits what's going on right now with COVID. Even we see the disease as part of the
invasion.
So if we move from repression to honesty, probably with this line, we can already do something in order to go through COVID and all this pandemic time. But it's so kind of literal what's going on right now with terror, with disease, with invasion.
Absolutely.
How is this?
It's always been this way. Like once we've healed COVID, there'll be another disease. There's always these things, because they are the external expression of our fear of death. And until we honestly transform our fear of death, and we come to the realization that we are eternal beings, until we get to that, we can't transmute the disease in the whole. And I know this is very mystic sounding. And so you can do whatever you want on the outside to try and make the world safe. But until enough of us get right into the weed at its roots and pull it out and transform it, we will never feel safe. We can't, that's what drives this whole, this whole planet.
Wow. And I know that you are unlocking that through the Gene Keys. I know that, and this is beautiful, but does it mean that the rest of the wounds are secondary?
No, it's just that, you see, it's actually only one wound. It's the sacred wound, but it has different manifestations. And it's because it has these different manifestations that it creates dynamics. When you look in the table, you'll see there are colors. It's color coded. And so you can see, Roberto, if you put it up again, you'll see that like the line 1s all color code with the line 4s, and it creates, and line 2s and 5s and 3s and 6s. And it creates dynamics between individuals, relationships, whole tribal groupings, races, and at many levels. So I don't know. Yeah, so you can see that repression has a relationship to rejection. We'll talk about that in a moment, because so the importance is like it's one wounding pattern, but it has these different expressions. And in my work with what I call the Venus sequence, which is a program that you're in right now, Luis, right? It's an incredible transformational program where you work really deeply into these personal wounding patterns. And even just to get to your core wounding pattern, because you'll have one of those 6. And one of those 6 will be will be the one that you carry in this lifetime. And you may carry elements of them all because they're all one thing, as I said, but you're going to have one that you're specifically here to address. You're carrying it on behalf of the whole. So if you carry repression, that happens to be mine, actually, the first line.
Mine is rejection. Mine is line 4.
Yours is 4. Okay. So if you carry that one, then you also carry the potential to heal those other issues. So you have the potential through healing the wound of rejection to decrease the hatred in the world, and the fear of colonization, the fear of something from the outside coming in and taking you over, or someone taking you over. And also to address the root core of poverty itself, which is this inequality that comes out of the fear of rejection. Anyway, should we do line 2, and then I'll tell the next part of the story.
It's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Let's go to yes, please. Denial.
Yeah. So the second line is like when that fear is expressed outwardly. So it's no longer repressed. When it's expressed externally, then it expresses itself as anger, and that as an energy that is just unaware of itself. And it's dangerous because it just kind of flies out. And in humans, it's denial because it's about acting without thinking, it's about speaking without realizing until afterwards. It's about doing things without really meaning it often, it's the energy of aggression itself. It's because it's rooted in the fear, but it's no longer repressed. So it's emerging freely into the world, wildly into the world, uncontrolled anger, uncontrolled fear that's expressed through rage. So it's rage when it hits the collective. And so, in one's own pattern, it's denial because it's something that you don't see about yourself easily. When you're really, really angry, it's hard to see what's going on. You're in the grip of an energy that you've lost your self-awareness and your self-control. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with anger either. Correctly managed, anger can be transformed into passion. It can be transformed into like really powerful, compassionate action, for example. But when it runs amok without the self-awareness, then it creates chaos. And so at the collective level where it becomes this rage, and it can become the rage of men, it can become the rage of women, it can become the rage of, it can be for all kinds of things and at all kinds of things, because it's projecting the fear onto something outside oneself and something quite personal. And so it drives this racial wound of violation. It drives violence itself, and it's why when we look at the world and we see, God, how can people do the things that they do? How can they do that? And it's because they're driven by this second line wound energy that is it's denial. It can't see itself. It's why a whole racial pool of people will literally take it upon themselves to attack another pool of people, to go and to try and sort of, violate or create or put violence onto another group. So it creates this incredible friction in all human beings, and it's because of those acts of violence that it propagates even more fear. So it's a feedback loop. So whenever people follow that energy, and it's a blind energy, then it creates more fear and more terror in the system. And it can be it's all about relationships. This one, see, it's not repressed, so it's about projecting it onto something outside yourself. And we see this in the world all the time, where one person, one group, one race, one whole nation is pitted against another, and there's this kind of and it's rooted in this deep fear that hasn't been honest with itself and has projected out externally its problem, its fear onto others. And so out of that comes acts of violence. And I don't just mean it can be violence through words. It's all levels of violation in the universe, in the world itself. And ultimately it's violation of the planet, and of resources and things around us. It's because there's that fear that's driving us and makes us compete. Yeah.
Well, no, you have to keep going, because okay. I mean, you have the flow, but as I listen, it's so with this codex, it's so easy to really interpret what's really going on today in the world. Is like so obvious that this line 1 and 2, and of course all of, but this 1 and 2 especially, are having they are protagonists today in our world, in the deep root of COVID, in the deep root of misunderstanding of what's going on in the world, with nations, with all this separation of power, and the way you explain it really translates what's really going on today in the world. Yeah. So this is fascinating.
So to be, in the second line, to really be responsible for your own wounding is the key. And you'll see that the word there is ease, which is like a really simple word. It means, it's like if a person is at ease, then they can't, out of that place, they're no longer kind of in the grip of this energy that's moving through them. So when we create societies where people are deeply relaxed, then this wound will start to dissipate, this particular one, because it really, it's about simplicity. When you have a simpler things and your needs are met, you don't get these horrible stories that occur, because you don't feel, you're not driven by that same energy that's seeking something outside yourself. So a lot of it is about coming into a deeper space inside oneself, a space of contemplation and relaxation, and being able to really breathe and work with your breath and be responsible for your own, body, for your own feelings and not follow them out into the world as projections and action that causes more reaction and difficulty. So it's a very simple, and simple word that there's a whole philosophy in that one short word of ease. And then the line 3 is shame. And, shame is, we each carry shame in different ways, and there's every psychologist or or therapist can take you into shame and the layers of shame that we hold because of different things and because of things that happen to us as children, and things that we've done that we regret, and mistakes, and that we carry all that as trauma inside our body, imprinted. And all of that kind of anxiety that we carry, at the collective level, it can become panic, because it's like this collective anxiety that something's wrong with the world. It's a pessimism as well, and you can see our media channels and things really stir this fire of like making us worried and anxious and panicky, and at a level where we feel out of control. We feel the world's out of control. We feel we can't be at peace in any way. So there's a real sort of, that sense of like something's wrong. I'm carrying it, but you don't even know what the shame is, the personal shame. So we have to kind of get to know ourselves really well. And you'll see that the healing virtue of this one is humor, which is an extraordinary you might not think that, but a simple thing, like it's to be able to laugh at oneself, and to be able to realize that one's own suffering is often, not so it's not funny, but that to be able to laugh at one's own patterns inside oneself is an incredible gift and a breakthrough for most people, because out of that sense of humor comes joy, and you begin to realize, that's the thing that breaks the pattern of shame, because shame has this very serious locked energy that makes it feel unsafe, the trauma. So as we start to understand, then we can start to kind of laugh again about things in life. We can start to appreciate things in life. We can start to feel the little bubbles of joy that were in us as children as we let go of that shame. And you'll see the racial wound here is migration. And it's the one, it's like, this is the refugee one. It's like, it's the one where you're pushed away from where you want to, you know, because of, you're driven by this energy of fear and anxiety. And it's a very motion, it's got a lot of energy in it to move you on, and the shame that goes with losing your life or your family or your home or your, you know, with losing your livelihood and those things like that, and having to constantly move and to try and find, you know, something ahead of you. And the planetary wound here is greed, because it's about lack. It's about, you know, that shame inside drives you to seek it out there. It's like it's driving you to try and, you want to satiate this feeling that's insatiable, the restlessness that drives us. And so you want to fill it from outside. So we try and fill it from outside in all kinds of ways, whether it's through overeating, whether it's through wanting more money, whether it's through wanting more of someone, looking at someone else and I want that, I want this, I want that. It drives us, this hunger for more, but we don't realize that we can never satiate it from the outside. You know, yes, we can feed ourselves and our hunger will go away, but it's deeper than physical hunger. So it drives the movements of change and flow and on our planet, and it forces us from our homes and you know, and we can see again today what greed has done to our planet. You know, like there are many who have a lot and there are then some who have none, and there's no balance in that. And so again, it's not even about blaming those that have or those that haven't. It's a dynamic woven into the basis of our lives. And you know, there's a great, you know, the wound, the most important thing here is to understand that we all carry shame, and that until we can release that shame from inside us, then we break the pattern of greed, that we break that pattern of panic, of like needing to always, we break that restlessness inside us, and then we can finally be at peace inside who we are and relax and accept and let go of that. And then we begin to find that joy and that humor of life again, and that warmth that is such a core part of being a human being, that warmth of the embrace of the friend, of the stranger, and the, you know, that's a deep part of who we are.
I love this line, and because humor is something that can be trained in many ways. So actually, even if we have to start somewhere, we always talk about awareness. Awareness is the first step. But if actually we have to do something in order to start making a difference somewhere, maybe humor is one of those where we can start in a subtle way to change things. So actually last night we have a comedy night, and it's so amazing when people start laughing. Just start expanding in many ways.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think when you talk different ways to be very practical and very efficient in the way we are going to be healing the planet. But let's keep going.
Yeah.
Line number 4. I feel very close to this one, so I'm really willing to learn more.
Yeah, so this is the rejection. You know, this is like being, you know, all these personal wounds, you know, they are imprinted in us when we are children. You know, so we carry them, and then events occur in our life. You know, the Indians would call it dharma or karma, that happens to us, things that happen to us that give us these wound patterns that they become trauma inside our body, and then we hold them, and they are the kind of they are the seeds of our journey of awakening in life. So if you carry the wound of rejection, obviously that's going to be something woven into the mythology and the fabric of who you are in your life. And there are so many ways in which these wound patterns manifest in our lives through all kinds of stories. And of things that happen to us and our parents, and all the stories of where we've come from. And so rejection or abandonment, like that, sometimes these are things that happen when we're very young as well, before we're even kind of really fully aware of them. And we don't even need to fully understand all the stories. We just have to come into physical contact with the energy in our body. And when we start to feel the trauma, we can begin to transmute the trauma. And you see that rejection wound is the fear of being rejected, or else being the one that rejects, is what creates hatred in the collective. It's like this. If you look at like how these wounds work together, you'll see that terror relates to hatred if you look at the colors in the collective wound. So the thing that you're most afraid of, if there's one group creates great fear, then the other group has this hatred, this feeling of revenge, that gets stuck in the gene pool and gets stuck in our DNA. And our DNA remembers things. It remembers things individually through our lineage, and it remembers things racially. The whole gene pool operate through memory. And it's been shown that the DNA holds trauma. It can hold trauma over multiple lineage, ancestral trauma. And what we don't know, but it's there, is that it also holds racial trauma. So we come in with this, carrying these burdens and baggages, and that becomes part of our transmutation. So even as I said at the beginning, like this could seem all overwhelming, but actually the work is doing it in your individual personal life. If you can combat the little rejections in your personal life, the fear of rejection, and if you work on that, then you're actually working deep into the whole matrix of all life, because you're affecting the ancestral memory that links you to all the people who you know, and even your ancestors, and your children and your children's children, if you have children. Yes. So it really ripples out into the fabric. That's the magic of this whole table that we're looking at, is that you do the individual work and it affects the whole. And you see there that the racial wound is colonization, which goes with invasion. So you have the invaders, and then you have the ones that are terrified of they've been colonized, and you can look at it in so many ways. Like you can look at this through viruses as well, colonizing us, and because you look at it in nature, and there are creatures and groups of beings and birds and things that are and ants and things that and insects that operate through these patterns of like migration, colonizing, violence, invasion. You will see it at every level woven into the fabric of Gaia herself. But in humans, it has a charge. It has an emotional charge. In nature, it's just what it is. But the same patterns are there. So it's really important to understand, that and of course, poverty again is what's created by the lack, because of rejection at the core is like creating divisions, it's creating national boundaries, it's creating fences, it's creating walls. It's because we want to keep things out, we want to keep ourselves protected, we want to defend ourselves, and that's what creates this poverty mentality, is that we can't share. This is the line 4 is the real heart line, and you'll see that the way to heal rejection is through gentleness. So if you hold the wound of rejection, or someone holds it, like the way you treat them is with gentleness. Like if you find a wounded animal, a wounded dog or a cat or something, and it's holding that, it has that fear, you can feel it's like it's kind of pushing, it's keeping things safe, and it's like, am I going to be rejected? So you treat it with incredible gentleness, and that's how you gain its trust. Again, and that's the same with us. We have to treat each other with this incredible gentleness in order that we can gain this trust again. And we have to rebuild that, but again, as an individual, we all have to do all of these in our personal lives, regardless of which one you may have in your gene keys that you're holding. we have all of them at the same time. We have to deal with all these issues. You know, in an average person's life, they're going to have to deal with all of these repression, some form of repression, some denial in their relationships where they have, you know, fights and things, and there's aggression, and then there's shame where one's like held by something, and yet it's deeply buried, and it doesn't always come out. It might have been that they betrayed or they were betrayed, and there's that shame being held. And then the rejection is also there, like this fear of like, you're not going to love me, you need to love me better. You know, all of that, it's all buried in our relationships, but it's also in our gene pools. So gentleness is a key.
Wow, so inspiring. So this is magic. It is magic. And for those who don't know, you can get and you can know about your wounds by your map of the keys that you can get on the genekeys.com site, and it's related to the year, the date, and the hour where you were born. So there's a lot of magic behind. Actually, Richard, because 4 is my is one of my lines. Is my line. I feel so related, and I feel I am the journey of transmutation and transformation because, for example, all what I'm writing now and my 2 books are about abundance, are about exponential happiness, are about how to create systems where we can all create synergy. And synergy is part of my city. I mean, basically the essence of my life and my purpose. So it's so interesting when you relate this to what's going on in the world, but at the same time, how we can move forward, having a full understanding of who we are. So thank you so much for sharing. We have the perfect timing to go into the other 2 ones.
We have time for them?
Yep.
Good. Maybe I'll do the last 2 together, but to save some time. So line 5 and 6, you know, you have line 5 guilt and line 6 separation. And so the guilt is different from the shame because the shame is personal and it's within this kind of framework of your lifetime. The guilt is something that's more of a burden that's carried, that you've come into the world with, and you're carrying it on behalf of the whole. You're carrying it maybe from your ancestors, from your parents, your grandparents, something that's not even belonging to you. It's not even often of this lifetime, but you're carrying this burden. And it will follow you into different areas of your life and cause a lot of difficulties and problems. You know, in the collective level, it creates delusion. So the 5th line is the line of leaders and leadership. And so it's where power is focused. And so power often uses delusion to kind of maintain, you know, like we see that through tyranny, right? Like you maintain this kind of delusion, this veil over the people that you're leading, and often, you know, it's because that underneath you're carrying this burden of yourself, and so you want to exert power over others. So you can see this at like tiny personal levels in your everyday life, just from guilting someone, you know, or you succumbing to a guilt of your own and then disempowering yourself. Or you can see it collectively, you know, through tyrannical places where power is centralized and controlling. You know, you might see it through big monopolies in the world where things are being controlled and whole groups are being controlled. And it's what actually at the great deepest level, it gives rise to war itself. So you have these wounds: disease, violence, greed, poverty, war. War is the 5th line wound. And it's deeply related to, you know, certain leaders. It's often certain people that create wars, you know, and the war, you know, it's like because of something that they're carrying from their childhood. And it's often that one wars are often caused by one person. It's in history we see that it's like by one person and their burden that they carry, but they're carrying it in a way. The energy is already there for all of us. You know, like it's a part of that wound is part of all of us as well. So it's something, it can be unlocked in lots of different ways. And obviously forgiveness is what's essential. I mean, you might say debt is also a way in which the fifth line controls and holds power over through holding people in debt. It's like, can be like financial debt, or it can be emotional debt. It can be, because it's the debt of guilt. It's like this, you're holding someone in this illusion that there's this power you have over them. And so, and you can see how it relates to the denial or the violation, or the violence, of the second line. So forgiveness is the golden key here, because, until you can totally forgive yourself, you can't release this kind of debt of guilt that you carry. So you have to forgive yourself, and then you have to forgive others as well often. And you have to realize that the whole kind of movie of what I'm explaining here, of the movie and the drama of humanity's pathway to awakening, it operates through these keys and codes. And so we have to see them impersonally and go, well, that's, if I can forgive myself in my own life, I begin to change the whole world. If I can forgive someone externally, then I can begin to change the whole world. So that's how this works. And then the final line, sixth line, is separation. And so it has a relationship to shame and this kind of, this sense that, you kind of keep yourself outside, that you're always like on the outside. So the sixth line is the outsider. That's the person that always feels like they're an outsider, the odd one out. And when you take that same energy into the collective, it becomes this, it's this terrible wound of annihilation. So you see it with panic and annihilation. You can just see, like, there are certain migration. You get to see that there are certain energies that come up into the gene pool that are rooted in this racial wound of indifference, like to exterminate an entire other group of people through indifference, and it is this wound of separation that creates this kind of the deepest wound, in a way, is indifference, because it's like you've got to be really cut off from your humanity to be able to enter into that, and that can actually infect an entire gene pool. As we know through history, we've seen it a lot, and you see certain races connected in karmic wounds together, and and they're kind of in dynamics, and the memory is still there because there hasn't been the forgiveness, and so that it keeps us separate. It keeps us feeling separate, believing we're separate, all because of this core wound of repression at the beginning. And of course, at a planetary level, that level of indifference gives rise to self-destruction, which is the path that we're currently on, because of this, our indifference to each other, to nature, to environment, because, the wounds keep us in this feeling of separateness from life itself. And of course, the ultimate healing virtue is to care, is to care about others. It comes out of, that's what love is. It's to care for others. It's to care for the things around you, to care for your environment, to care about yourself, to care about everything, to care about your body, to care about health, to care about, and, so this is the whole journey of our healing, to come from, like, to heal this sacred wound with its different patterns and how it connects us in these different ways. And it's these virtues that are the most important, self-honesty, a sense of ease in one's being, regardless of external conditions, a sense of humor to be able, and warmth to be able to connect with others, to laugh even at difficult times and with difficult things, because that gives us a sense of perspective that we really, really need. And it begins to chip away at the shame that we all carry. And then gentleness, whenever we feel that fear of rejection, that fear that we may be, kicked out of our heart, that another may hurt us, and we treat ourselves with gentleness first, and then others as well. And then that gives rise to forgiveness, and ultimately it awakens our heart, so that the natural human state is to care deeply for all life. So if you have all your needs met, your deep emotional needs, you will care deeply for others and for life and animals and the creatures and the birds and the plants and the things around us. And then ultimately we are here to be caretakers of the world. So that's our final goal, in a way, to become the stewards of this planet. And we may have to go through some shame ourselves as a species. We may create this self-destruction in order, we may have to, I hope we don't, but we may have to, in order that we can awaken, and we can find these virtues inside ourselves. And so it's really again, I just repeat, so I bring it all down to one thing. It's all about, you can have a huge impact on the whole. Every person, we think we can't, you might think you can't do, what can I do to help this planet and the direction we're going in? And you can have a huge impact on the whole by working in your individual life to heal your individual wounds that you carry through your relationships, in your community, in your immediate land where you live, and the people you live with, and those issues that you carry. If you can manage to heal those, then through resonance, through biogenetic resonance, through, the mystery and poetry of our interconnection, you will reach out and imprint all life with that healing energy. And you'll begin to clean the DNA memory, that you carry as well, the whole ancestral burden that we all carry as well, of the wounds of the past. And we begin to let go and feel lighter. And that's the journey of awakening. And no one can fully awaken without having gone through their own deep wound sequence and having healed it and addressed it and faced the fear that's there at the core. So wow. Yeah, that's my story.
Wow, what a story! Oh my goodness! But something that I connected as I saw the whole table is that we start line 1, personal wound, with repression, and actually the last line, the last virtue, is care and love. I see a huge connection here from an intuitive point of view, because when we talk about self-compassion, we know what it means. You are starting to be kind to yourself. You start to be loving yourself, and that could be a really nice beginning. So we know the research from Christine Neff and from the whole compassion researchers around the world, how effective that is. So maybe that could be one of the ways where we can start healing the world by healing ourselves. So I feel that might be something there. And I know but as I contemplate this, I feel that there is a really, really important first step maybe that we can do, of course, is awareness and contemplation, but then it's about self-compassion, and that might be something that can help many people.
Yeah, because once you heal your own heart and the relationships around you, and you have and then it spills out into your community, and then it becomes compassionate action, because you're just full of it. So your life purpose starts to really manifest, and then you do the thing that you're really here to do, and it's a powerful thing, and it will have an effect, even if it's in a small area of the world, it will have a much bigger effect than you realize.
Well, thank you, Richard. I encourage everybody to go to jinkids.com, get your own map and your own wounds, and start healing yourself. We need you. We need you to start healing yourself. We are going to create the secure base, but we all are accountable and responsible for our own healing. So we are going to do this together. Collective suffering requires collective healing. So, and thank you, Richard, because you are light for so many people everywhere in the world. This is just fantastic. Thank you so much for you.
Thank you, Luis. It's a pleasure, real pleasure, and love to everyone.
Thank you.